the richest neighborhood in all of Johannesburg, behind walls so high you could not see the rooftops, a man was dying. His name was Solomon Mthembu, and every doctor who walked through his door left with the same answer. Nothing. They found nothing. They could fix nothing. But then, one quiet afternoon, a young woman with dust still on her shoes walked into his bedroom. She had no degree. She had no title. She had nothing but a memory and a handful of leaves. And what she did next left everyone speechless. Who was she? And how did she know what the finest medical minds in the country could not figure out? Sit back, relax, and let us find out. The emergency had started 6 weeks earlier. Solomon had collapsed in his office during a board meeting. His assistant had screamed. 2 colleagues caught him before he hit the floor. The ambulance arrived within minutes. At the hospital, they ran every test available. Blood panels, brain scans, spinal fluid analysis, nerve conduction studies. The results came back one after another, and every single one said the same thing. Inconclusive. Solomon was not a small name. He and his wife, Esther, had built one of the largest logistics companies in southern Africa. Their trucks moved goods across borders. Their warehouses stretched from Cape Town to Nairobi. For 30 years, Solomon had been the kind of man who shook hands with presidents and signed deals over dinner. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and full of energy. His laugh could fill an entire room, but now, lying on a hospital bed in a private ward, he looked like a shadow of himself. His arms would not move. His legs had gone still. His voice, once so powerful, had faded to a whisper so faint that even Esther had to lean close to hear him. Esther stood beside the bed that afternoon, watching the heart monitor blink. She had not slept properly in days. Her eyes were swollen from crying. The lead physician, Dr. Abara, approached her near the window. He spoke quietly. "Mrs. Mthembu, I must be honest with you." Esther looked at him. "Please. We have consulted with 3 specialist teams. We have sent samples to a research hospital in London. No one can identify the condition." Esther's voice cracked. "You are telling me that with all this technology, all these machines, all these experts, nobody knows what is happening to my husband?" Dr. Abara lowered his gaze. "We are not giving up, but for now I believe Solomon would benefit from resting at home. The hospital environment can sometimes add stress to the body. I will visit him personally 3 times a week." Esther turned back toward the bed. Solomon's eyes were open, watching her. He tried to speak, but only managed a faint sound. She walked to him and held his hand. "We are going home," she said softly, "and you are going to get better. I promise you that." 2 days later, Solomon was brought home by ambulance. The mansion, which usually buzzed with staff and visitors, had gone quiet. The housekeeper had prepared the master bedroom with extra pillows and medical equipment the doctor had ordered. A nurse came twice a day to check his vitals. But Solomon continued to worsen. His fingers, which had still been able to grip a cup the week before, now lay flat and motionless on the sheets. His breathing became shallow at night. Esther sat beside him every evening, talking to him, reading to him, pretending everything was fine. But when she stepped outside the bedroom door, she pressed her back against the wall and cried silently. The company needed her. There were contracts to sign. Partners were calling. The board wanted meetings. Esther was being pulled in 2 directions, and the weight was crushing her. One morning, Dr. Abara sat with her in the downstairs study. "You need help in this house," he said gently. "A personal care assistant. Someone who can be with Solomon during the day while you handle the business." Esther nodded slowly. "Yes, I have been thinking the same thing. I know a reputable agency," the doctor said. "They send reliable people. Please arrange it," Esther replied. "I need someone patient, someone who will treat him with dignity." She did not know it then, but that simple request was about to change everything. Far from Johannesburg, in a small village in Limpopo province, the sun was setting behind a row of mango trees. A young woman named Thandiwe sat on a wooden stool outside a small mud brick house. She was 24 years old. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried a sadness that had not left her in months. The house behind her had once been full of warmth. Her grandfather, Papa Elias, had lived there for as long as anyone could remember. He was the village healer. People came from nearby towns when their children had fevers that would not break, when their joints swelled and ached, when strange rashes appeared that no clinic could explain. Papa Elias would walk into the bush with a small knife and a cloth bag, and he would return with roots and leaves that he prepared carefully over a fire. He never rushed, he never guessed. He watched, he listened, and then he treated. Thandiwe had been his shadow since she was a small girl. She carried his bag. She ground the roots with a stone pestle while he explained what each one did. She asked endless questions. "Papa, how do you know this leaf and not that one?" The old man would chuckle softly. "Because this leaf whispers to me, child, and that one stays silent." She never fully understood what he meant until she was older. He was teaching her to observe, to notice which plants grew near water and which preferred dry soil, to see the color of a stem and know whether the plant was ready or still too young. It was knowledge passed down through generations, and Papa Elias gave it to her freely because she was the only one who wanted it. But 7 months ago, Papa Elias fell ill. It was sudden. One evening he was sitting by the fire telling stories, and the next morning he could not stand. Thandiwe did everything she knew. She prepared the teas he had taught her. She rubbed his chest with oils. She stayed awake through the night watching his breathing. But his body was old, and the sickness was beyond what herbs could reach. He passed away on a Wednesday morning, just as the sun came through the window. Thandiwe buried him beside the mango tree he had planted when she was born. The whole village came. People wept. They told stories about the lives he had saved. But when everyone left and the house went quiet, Thandiwe sat alone on the stool and stared at the empty doorway. She had no parents, no siblings. Papa Elias had been everything. Among the mourners that day was a woman named Blessing. She and Thandiwe had grown up together, chasing goats and swimming in the river. But Blessing had moved to Johannesburg years ago to find work. She came back to the village when she heard about Papa Elias. After the burial, Blessing sat beside Thandiwe under the mango tree. "You cannot stay here by yourself," Blessing said. Thandiwe looked at the ground. "This is the only place I have ever known." "I know," Blessing said gently. "But there is nothing left for you here now. Come to Johannesburg with me. You can stay in my flat until you find your feet." Thandiwe did not answer right away. The thought of leaving the village terrified her. But she also knew Blessing was right. The house felt empty. The silence was unbearable. "Let me think about it," Thandiwe said quietly. Blessing stayed 2 more days, then returned to the city. Before she left, she wrote her address and phone number on a piece of paper and pressed it into Thandiwe's hand. "Whenever you are ready," she said. 5 weeks passed. Thandiwe tried to continue life in the village, but every corner of the house reminded her of Papa Elias. His cloth bag still hung on the hook by the door. His wooden mortar still sat on the shelf. One morning she woke up, looked at the empty room, and made her decision. She packed a small bag with a few clothes, tied her grandfather's cloth bag to the outside of it, and walked to the road where the long-distance bus stopped. Hours later, Thandiwe stepped off the bus in Johannesburg. The noise hit her first. Cars honking, people shouting, music playing from a shop across the street. She stood on the pavement, clutching her bag, looking at the piece of paper Blessing had given her. She asked a woman selling fruit for directions. The woman pointed down a long road. Thandiwe walked for 20 minutes before she found the building. She climbed 2 flights of stairs and knocked on the door. Blessing opened it with a wide smile. "You came." "I came," Thandiwe said, and for the first time in weeks she almost smiled. Blessing's flat was small, 1 room with a bed, a sofa, a tiny kitchen area, and a bathroom down the hall shared with other tenants, but it was clean, and Blessing had already laid out a mat and blanket for Thandiwe. "Tomorrow," Blessing said, pouring tea, "I will take you to a domestic work agency. They place people in homes, cleaning, cooking, caring for elderly or sick people. The pay is decent and the families are usually good." Thandiwe wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Thank you, Blessing. I do not know how to repay you." Blessing waved her hand. "You do not owe me anything. You and Papa Elias fed me many times when my mother had nothing. This is what we do." The next morning, the 2 women walked to a neat office building near the main road. A sign outside read Harmony Home Care Services. Inside, a woman named Mrs. Dlamini sat behind a desk. "Good morning. How can I help?" Blessing spoke first. "She is hard-working, patient, and kind. I thought your agency could help her." Mrs. Dlamini looked at Thandiwe. "What is your name?" Thandiwe, have you done care work before? I helped my grandfather care for sick people in our village for many years. Mrs. Dlamini raised an eyebrow with interest. All right, we will do a short assessment and add you to our register. When a position opens, we will contact you. Thandiwe completed the simple task they gave her. She answered their questions calmly and honestly. When they finished, Mrs. Dlamini smiled. You will hear from us soon, Thandiwe. 4 days later, the call came. Thandiwe was sitting on the sofa when her phone rang. She picked it up quickly. Good morning, Thandiwe. This is Mrs. Dlamini from Harmony Home Care. We have a placement for you. A family in the northern suburbs needs a personal care assistant for a very sick man. Can you come to the office this morning? Thandiwe's heart jumped. Yes, ma'am. I will come right away. She arrived within the hour. Mrs. Dlamini handed her a folder with an address and instructions. This is a prominent family, Mrs. Dlamini said carefully. The husband is very ill. The wife is a businesswoman and needs someone reliable during the day. You will help feed him, keep him comfortable, and alert the medical team if anything changes. I understand, Thandiwe said. They are expecting you this afternoon. Thandiwe took the bus to the address. When she arrived, she stood outside a gate so large it looked like the entrance to a fortress. She checked the paper again. This was it. She pressed the intercom. A voice crackled through. Yes, good afternoon, my name is Thandiwe. I was sent by Harmony Home Care Services. A pause. Then the gate buzzed open. She walked up a long driveway lined with trimmed hedges. The house was enormous. White walls, tall windows, a fountain in the front courtyard. A woman in a uniform met her at the front door and led her through a marble hallway to a study where Esther sat behind a large desk. Esther looked up. Her face was composed, but her eyes were heavy with exhaustion and worry. You are Thandiwe? Yes, ma'am. Esther stood slowly. Come with me. They walked upstairs in silence. Esther opened a door to a large bedroom, and there, on a wide bed surrounded by pillows and medical equipment, lay Solomon. His body was still. His arms rested at his sides like they had been placed there. His eyes were open, looking at the ceiling. He did not turn his head when they entered. This is my husband, Esther said. Her voice trembled slightly. The doctors cannot tell us what is wrong. He cannot walk. He can barely speak. Some days he cannot even swallow properly. Thandiwe looked at the man on the bed. Something stirred inside her, but she kept her face calm. You will be here during the day, Esther continued. You will help him with everything. Feeding, adjusting his position, keeping him clean. If you see anything unusual, call the doctor immediately. Yes, ma'am. I will take good care of him. Esther studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You may start tomorrow. That night, Thandiwe lay on the mat in Blessing's flat, staring at the ceiling. Blessing was already asleep. But Thandiwe's mind would not rest. The image of Solomon lying on that bed kept returning to her. She whispered into the darkness. Those signs, I have seen them before. She closed her eyes and tried to push the thought away. It was too early. She had just started. She could not walk into a wealthy family's home and tell them she knew something the doctors did not. They would think she was foolish, or worse, dangerous. But the thought did not leave. It sat in the back of her mind like a stone at the bottom of a river. The next morning, Thandiwe arrived early at the mansion. She greeted the gatekeeper politely, walked through the courtyard, and went upstairs to Solomon's room. He was awake. His eyes moved toward her when she entered. Good morning, sir, she said softly. My name is Thandiwe. I will be here with you today. Solomon blinked slowly. It was the only response he could give. Thandiwe began her work. She adjusted his pillows. She wiped his face with a warm cloth. She fed him a thin porridge that the kitchen had prepared, lifting the spoon carefully to his lips. She spoke to him gently as she worked, telling him small things about the weather, about the birds she had seen in the garden. She did not know if he understood, but she believed kindness mattered even when words could not be returned. As the days passed, Thandiwe watched Solomon closely. She noticed how his fingers curled slightly inward. She noticed the faint tremor in his left hand that came and went. She noticed the way his eyes darted back and forth when he tried to speak, as if the words were trapped behind a wall his body had built. One afternoon, while she was rubbing lotion on his arms, a memory hit her so hard she stopped moving. She was 12 years old, standing in Papa Elias's house. A farmer named Mr. Sithole had been carried in by his sons. He could not walk. He could not lift his arms. His speech had faded to a mumble. The village clinic had sent him home and told the family to prepare for the worst. Papa Elias had examined the man for a long time without speaking. Then he had turned to Thandiwe. "Fetch my bag, child, and put on your walking shoes. We are going deep into the bush today." They had walked for nearly 2 hours. Papa Elias led her to a clearing near a stream where a particular plant grew. It had dark green leaves with a reddish vein running through the center and thick, knotted roots that gripped the rocky soil. "This one," he had said, kneeling down. "This is what we need." "What does it do, Papa?" "The body sometimes forgets how to talk to itself," he explained, cutting the roots carefully. "The muscles stop listening to the brain. This plant reminds the body to reconnect." Over the next week, Papa Elias had prepared the roots and leaves into a tea and a paste. He gave Mr. Sithole the tea twice a day and applied the paste to his joints in the back of his neck every night. On the 4th day, Mr. Sithole moved his right hand for the first time. By the end of 2 weeks, he was sitting up. A month later, he walked out of Papa Elias's house on his own feet. Now standing in Solomon's bedroom in Johannesburg, Thandiwe felt her hands trembling. The similarities were unmistakable. The frozen limbs, the fading voice, the eyes that moved when the body could not. It was the same pattern. She was almost certain, but she said nothing. Not yet. She went home that evening and sat quietly on the sofa. Blessing noticed. "What is wrong? Did something happen at work?" Thandiwe shook her head. "No, the family is kind. The work is fine." But that night, she barely slept. The same question turned over and over in her mind. What if I am right? And what if I say nothing and that man dies? 3 more days passed. Each morning, Thandiwe watched Solomon grow slightly weaker. His swallowing was becoming more difficult. The nurse who came in the afternoons looked worried. Dr. Abara visited and adjusted medications, but nothing changed. On the 4th evening, Esther came home earlier than usual. She walked into the bedroom and stood at the foot of the bed, looking at her husband. Her shoulders sank. "How was he today?" she asked without turning around. Thandiwe hesitated. Then she spoke. "Ma'am, may I say something?" Esther turned. "Yes, I may be completely wrong, and if I am, I apologize in advance. But I think I may have seen this kind of sickness before." The room went very still. Esther stared at her. "What do you mean you have seen it before?" Thandiwe spoke carefully, keeping her voice steady. "In the village where I grew up, a man became sick in the same way. He could not move, he could not speak. The clinic gave up on him, but my grandfather was a healer. He treated the man with a specific herb, a plant that grows near streams in the bush, and the man recovered." Esther's expression shifted. Hope and doubt fought across her face. "Your grandfather was a traditional healer?" "Yes, ma'am. He treated people for over 40 years. And this man with the same symptoms, he truly recovered?" "He did. Fully. He lived many more years after that." Esther pressed her hand against her forehead. She walked to the window and stood there for a long time. When she finally turned back, her eyes were glistening. "The doctors have tried everything," she said, almost to herself. "Every specialist, every test, every medication." She looked at Thandiwe. "Where is this herb?" "It grows near my village, in a forest by the river. I know the exact place." "How long would it take to get it?" "If I leave early in the morning, I can be back by nightfall." Esther closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them with a quiet resolve. "Go tomorrow. I will have my driver take you." The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Thandiwe climbed into a black SUV. The driver took the highway north out of the city. Hours passed. The buildings gave way to open fields, then to scattered villages, then to the red dust roads of Limpopo. When they reached the village, Thandiwe asked the driver to wait. She walked past the mango tree, past her grandfather's house and into the bush along a path she had walked 100 times as a child. The sounds of the forest closed around her. Birds, insects, the distant trickle of the stream. She found the clearing, and there, growing among the rocks by the water, were the plants. Dark green leaves with reddish veins, thick knotted roots. She knelt down and began to cut them carefully, just as Papa Elias had shown her. "Papa," she whispered, "please let this work. Let me honor what you taught me." She gathered enough for 2 weeks of treatment, wrapped them in damp cloth to keep them fresh, and walked back to the car. By evening, she was back in Johannesburg. Esther was waiting at the front door. "You found them?" "Yes, ma'am." They went to the kitchen. Thandiwe washed the roots and leaves thoroughly. She crushed the roots with a pestle, tore the leaves into small pieces, and boiled them together in a pot of clean water. The kitchen filled with a sharp, earthy smell. She also prepared a thicker paste by grinding the roots with a small amount of oil. "He will drink this tea every morning and every evening," Thandiwe explained, "and I will apply this paste to his joints and the back of his neck before he sleeps." Esther watched every step. "How long before we know if it is working?" 3 days, Thandiwe said. "If there is any change at all within 3 days, we continue. If nothing happens, then I was wrong, and you should explore other options." 3 days, Esther repeated. That night, they gave Solomon the first cup of herbal tea. Thandiwe held the cup to his lips and tilted it gently. He swallowed slowly. Then she rubbed the paste onto his hands, his elbows, his knees, and the back of his neck. She worked quietly, pressing the mixture into his skin with her thumbs. The first day passed, no change. Solomon lay still, as he had for weeks. Dr. Abara arrived for his routine visit and saw the paste on Solomon's skin. He frowned. "Mrs. Mthembu, what is this?" "A traditional treatment, slowly," Esther said. "I must advise caution. We do not know what is in these plants. There could be reaction." "I understand," Esther replied, "but I am asking for 3 days. That is all." The doctor looked at her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. 3 days, but I want to monitor him daily." The second day came and went, still nothing visible. Esther began to pace the hallway outside the bedroom. Doubt crept back in. She had put her trust in a young woman from a village, a woman who had no medical degree, no laboratory, nothing but a memory of her grandfather. Was she being foolish? That night, Thandiwe applied the paste again. She gave Solomon the tea. She sat beside the bed for a while, watching him breathe. Then she went home. It was past midnight when Esther's phone rang. She had fallen asleep on the couch downstairs. She grabbed the phone, disoriented. It was the night nurse. Her voice was shaking. "Ma'am, please come upstairs, quickly." Esther's heart nearly stopped. She ran up the stairs, her bare feet slapping against the marble. She burst through the bedroom door. Solomon was looking at her. His lips were moving. "Esther." She froze. "Esther, come here." His voice was weak. It was rough and cracked, but it was clear. For the first time in over a month, Solomon Mthembu had spoken a full sentence. Esther walked to the bed as if in a dream. She took his hand. "Solomon?" "I am thirsty," he said. She laughed and cried at the same time. The nurse brought water. Solomon drank slowly, his throat working with effort but managing. "Thank God," Esther whispered, pressing her forehead against his hand. "Thank God." The next morning, Esther told Thandiwe what had happened. Thandiwe listened quietly, then smiled. "We continue," she said. "Yes," Esther replied, her eyes bright for the first time in months. "We continue," and so they did. Every morning, the tea. Every night, the paste. Slowly, day by day, Solomon's body began to wake up. First, his fingers moved. He could grip a cup again. Then his arms responded, lifting slightly off the bed. After a week, he could sit up with pillows supporting him. After 2 weeks, they brought a wheelchair, and Thandiwe would push him through the garden. He turned his face toward the sun and breathed deeply. "I forgot what fresh air smelled like," he said. Thandiwe encouraged him gently. "Try to move your feet, sir, even a little. Every small movement helps." He tried. At first nothing happened. Then one toe wiggled, then another. Within a week he could press his feet against the floor. They brought crutches. He stood for the first time in 2 months, shaking, gripping the crutches so hard his knuckles turned white. Esther held her breath. He took one step, then he stopped and looked at his wife. "I am standing," he said. There were tears on his face. Progress continued. Crutches gave way to a walking stick. The walking stick gave way to a slow, careful shuffle across the room with nothing but his own 2 legs. The morning Solomon walked into the dining room by himself and sat down at the table. Esther put her head in her hands and wept openly. Dr. Abara came for what he expected to be a routine visit and stopped dead in the hallway when he saw Solomon sitting upright in a chair by the window, reading a newspaper. "This is not possible," the doctor said quietly. He examined Solomon thoroughly. Heart rate improved, muscle response returning, neurological function restoring. He shook his head in disbelief. I have been practicing medicine for 27 years, he said. I do not have an explanation for this. Solomon looked at him calmly. The explanation is in the kitchen, and her name is Thandiwe. A week later, the hospital that had treated Solomon invited Thandiwe for a meeting. Several doctors sat around a long table. They asked her to describe the herbs, the preparation method, the application process. Thandiwe answered every question patiently and thoroughly. She drew the plant from memory. She described where it grew, what the soil looked like, how the roots should be cut. One of the senior doctors leaned back in his chair. We spent months and hundreds of thousands of rands trying to solve this case, and the answer was growing by a river in Limpopo. Another doctor spoke more gently. Miss Thandiwe, your grandfather was clearly a remarkable man, and so are you. They presented her with an award for her contribution to the case and gave her a monetary prize. Thandiwe accepted it graciously, but what she did next surprised everyone. She went straight to Blessing's flat that afternoon. When Blessing opened the door, Thandiwe held out an envelope. "What is this?" Blessing asked. "Open it." Blessing looked inside and gasped. "Thandiwe, I cannot accept this. This is too much. You gave me a place to sleep when I had nowhere to go," Thandiwe said firmly. "You fed me. You took me to the agency. Without you, none of this would have happened. Please take it." Blessing hugged her so tightly that Thandiwe could feel her shaking. "I am so proud of you," Blessing whispered. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Esther and Solomon had been having long conversations about the young woman who had saved his life. One evening after dinner, they invited Thandiwe to sit with them in the living room. Solomon looked at her with deep warmth in his eyes. "Thandiwe, you gave me my life back. I will never forget what you did." Esther nodded beside him. "We could never repay you, but we would like to try." Thandiwe lowered her head. "You do not owe me anything. I did what my grandfather taught me to do." Solomon leaned forward. "Tell me something. What is your dream? If you could do anything in this world, what would it be?" Thandiwe was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. "I would like to study medicine, properly, at a university. I want to understand the science behind what my grandfather knew by instinct. I want to work in a hospital one day and help people who have no one else to help them. I want to build something in his name. A clinic, maybe. A place where traditional knowledge and modern medicine can work together." The room was silent. Esther reached over and took Solomon's hand. They looked at each other, and a wordless agreement passed between them. 2 weeks later, Solomon called Thandiwe into the study. Esther was there too, smiling in a way Thandiwe had never seen before. "Thandiwe," Solomon said, "we have been in contact with the University of Cape Town." Thandiwe's eyes widened. "You have been accepted into their pre-medical program," Esther said. "Full scholarship. We have arranged everything." Thandiwe opened her mouth, but no words came out. Solomon continued, "We have also established a trust fund in your name. When you complete your studies, it will be enough for you to build that clinic you spoke about." Esther stood up and walked to her. "And there is one more thing. We do not want you to leave this house. You are family now. You will live here. You will have your own room. And a driver will take you to campus every day." Thandiwe stood completely still. Her lips trembled. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. She looked at Solomon, then at Esther, then back at Solomon. "I do not know what to say," she managed at last. Esther smiled gently. "You already said everything that mattered the day you saved my husband." Months passed. Thandiwe began her studies. She was diligent, focused, and hungry to learn. The professors quickly noticed her unusual combination of traditional knowledge and sharp scientific curiosity. She became one of the top students in her program. One afternoon, as the driver brought her home from campus, Thandiwe sat in the back seat of the car and looked out at the passing city. The traffic, the tall buildings, the people rushing along pavements. She thought about the day she had arrived in Johannesburg with nothing but a small bag and a crumpled piece of paper with Blessing's address on it. She thought about Papa Elias and his quiet voice explaining things by the fire. She thought about the cloth bag that still hung on the hook in a house far away, in a village where the mango trees grew tall and the river whispered through the bush. A gentle smile crossed her face. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that her life would never be the same again. And somewhere she was sure, Papa Elias was smiling too. Dear friends, what do you think about this story? Do you believe Thandiwe was simply in the right place at the right time? Or do you believe she was meant to be there? I would truly love to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments below. I will be there reading every single one. In the next few days, I will be sharing another story, one even more powerful, one that will touch your heart in ways you do not expect. So make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss it. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your time.